Right, if you were watching the last one, sorry about that. I don't know what happened then. It just froze on the screen. That's probably gremlins in the system. Yeah, I'm just trying to find a decent piece of charcoal. Bear with me. Yeah, the practice thing is, I don't know. Like I said, yesterday I was because I'm trying to, do more figurative stuff within the confines of here, and it to be more, in line with the kind of thing I do. And so I was yesterday. My cat scratching at the door. I should let him in. No, it's all right. So I just thought that practice for me, I've never really been one for practicing things. It's always been about the doing. I've always wanted to get to the doing. Even if I think back to when I was doing the technical illustration thing when I was a teenager, and I was doing that. I always remember wanting to do it, do the thing rather than practicing with the airbrush or whatever. I just wanted to get to the point when I was drawing American Cadillacs, because that was all I wanted to do, was draw these Cadillac DeVille. I think it was the one that I really wanted to do an airbrush drawing of this, or painting of this thing. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to practice how to draw wheels, ellipses, and all that kind of thing. I just wanted to draw this thing. And you put that down to people want to, you got to walk before you can run and all that kind of stuff. And I took that as what it was. That was just my impatience to get to a point where I could do this thing. And when you're young, you can do anything straight away, don't you? So you're invincible, and that was kind of what I put it down to. And I'm all these years later, I still feel the same about practicing. I still feel this is getting in the way of what I really want to do, kind of thing. And I think with the technical illustration course, it was about technique. Obviously, you learn to use an airbrush and to mask and to work with the inks and gouache and all that sort of stuff. So you learn all that. And then initially the Cadillac DeVille would have been traced and and transferred to the CS10 board and all the rest of it. And so technique was the thing. So I can understand that really practice was required for that. But as I said, it still deep down in me was seemed to be a bit of a wasted time. And all these years later, I still have that thing about practice. It seems to be something that's stopping me doing what I want to do. So I have this thing of just doing it. And as I was saying in the other one, which is interesting, this is like practice is when you focus on something in particular you want to do. You want to focus on, say, eyes or mark making. Simple things like mark making. I mean, mark making really isn't the domain of practice. It is if you're technically minded and or you're technically driven and it's all about technique. Then I think that practice is, mark making is a practiced thing. But as I said before, because I'm a responsive artist, I can't equate that kind of thinking to what I do, because my marks are in response to that kind of thing. But the interesting thing about doing it is that inevitably there'll be things that you feel haven't met or achieved what you're trying to do, and in that case, they will become a focus. Not necessarily in the piece you're working on, but in general, it'll become something that becomes a focus. So in a way, that's practice as a consequence, as opposed to practice as a preliminary intention, or unconnected intention. So as a consequence of it not achieving certain things, whether it be the way it's shaded, whether it be the way that, the shape of the eyes not being right, or things not being in the right position, all those kind of things, your focus then will become that thing in the next drawing that you do. So in a kind of non-practicing kind of way, you're practicing, or not a non-traditional way of practicing, you're practicing. So making the drawings is your practice, and your development is based on the drawings that you produce. The thing is that it doesn't work if you're confused by expectations. So the expectations of achievement can be a difficult thing to navigate, to bypass in some cases, because you can't be objective. You can't be objective about it if you have a definition of what you think your work should be based on something else, or somebody else's work, or somebody else's technique. You can't be objective, because that person's that ideal that you've given yourself, that goal, becomes your definition, and inevitably you compare yourself with that. So being objective about whether or not you succeeded or not is the hardest thing, and that will determine your attitude to your, to whether or not, well, to your work, but whether or not you need to practice or focus on something in particular. So, so the whole thing of, the problem is with this, and I was thinking again about this sort of self-diagnosis thing, which is what I'm doing, and analysing why I do the things I do and all the rest of it. The problem is with that it can be self-destructive, and really it's better not to consider these things, particularly when it comes to what we do. If you're an artist, then I think try not to think about it too much and just get on and do it is probably the best attitude to have. If you've got the kind of mind that wants to analyze things to the nth degree, then it's hard. It's art is something. Analysis is not something that art requires. It doesn't require to analyze why. It requires you to react, respond, feel, all the things that you think it should be. It requires you to do those things, but it doesn't require you to analyze and rationalize what you do, particularly if it's in the you're in the process. Analyzing what you're doing while you're in the process is probably sort of the death knell for your creativity, because it doesn't need to be talked about. It doesn't need to be broken up and diagnosed for what it is. I think only at the end of it you might say that it achieved or it didn't achieve. It was a real consequence of your creativity, your response, or it was just simply a going through the motions thing, or you might just sort of say that it was the intention was to capture the eyes or whatever it was, but it failed, or it was in the eyes that I saw the person, and it failed to do that. Whatever it was, it doesn't necessarily mean a thing. This is another thing about the whole sort of practice thing, that it's elements within the face that are the denoters of the mood or the essence. Then it's not necessarily that. It is sometimes, but it's not necessarily that. It can be all of it. It's a cumulative thing. So it's strange, it's strange. This I'm just talking about the practical side of things. It's strange how the tonal qualities of something can be. This is one thing that I really like, and I found this early on with charcoal. The tonal qualities of a thing, of a face, can be, this sort of light and shade thing, can be achieved with surprising ease if it's not embedded within a technique. If it's about this, that there has to be an evenness, a certain sort of the way the light hits it and all that all those sort of constructive things, then there's no ease in that at all. There's just lots of practice. Again, back to this practice thing. And to be able to do it without practicing, to be able to achieve those things, I think are more to do with the connected way in which you draw than any deliberation. Because that's the thing. Once you get into a point where I'm going to deliberately try to achieve this particular thing, all that, again, that would be attached to practice. If you're that kind of person that you have a deliberate intention, you're gonna have to practice that. Particularly if it's a technique, not a just a response thing. You're gonna have to consider the way that you do it, and that means practicing. But I don't know. I mean, I once read that artists, creative people, are the people that just dive in and do things. They don't, and they think about it later. And I think that's kind of why I feel like I do. I kind of relate to that statement, because it's like, yeah, I get that. I just want to dive in and do it, and it works or it doesn't. But as I said, I've always had that feeling of practicing is a bit of a waste of time. And I know many of you will think that's a complete nonsense, but it's just how I felt about practice. And sorry, I'm just looking at the overall at the moment. Charcoal's not playing nicely this morning, as you can tell, but I'm not bothered. I'm more interested in trying to get across this idea that perhaps practice could be the one thing that is holding you back, because it's not a real doing thing. It's the thing you do before you do. And maybe that is the problem, because a lot of people, and that's what I was talking about with yesterday. So it was like thinking that I should do this, and thinking about the more figurative stuff that I'm planning to do, and then thinking, oh, perhaps I should practice. Perhaps I should just run through something. But see that everything feeds into the way I think about stuff. I think that drawing something twice is a problem, which means I can practice doing this head before I try drawing this head, because my first response, and I know I talk about Robert Henry a lot, but he did say that the moment that you encounter an individual, a face, a person, is the moment that you want to capture. So if following that theory, that's exactly what I'm saying, is that I can't draw something twice, because the first time I met them was the first response that I had to them. And that's the thing that I wanted to capture. And if I didn't capture it right the first time, then I didn't capture it. It wasn't going to happen again. It wasn't going to be a revisit and a redraw, and it wasn't going to be like that, because I'd already encountered that individual. I'd already experienced their essence, their persona, and doing that again would be difficult. A bit like the drawing a face, and this is probably why he said about having a good memory. People. One of the students said about, oh well, Robert Henry, because he thought that what Robert Henry was saying was he should draw from memory, but he wasn't saying that. He was saying, remember the emotion that you felt when you first met that person. That's what he was referring to, because that's the emotion that you need to embed within your portrait. Simple. I mean, it's just typical I can't use the word academic, but it's a commercial kind of portrait, and it needed, a certain amount of rehearsal. I don't want to use the word practice. I think I would do different views or different poses of the subject, and try and do it that way. Try and get around the problem of not being able to draw somebody twice, or I was just painting them. You know what I mean? This maybe the preparation of the pose and the portrait was something that I couldn't do. Maybe it's just not in my thing to prepare. I just do it, and that's probably what I would do. To be honest, that would probably be the route I would take. But the practice thing is, I think it's each to their own. I do think it's like all of this is, it is just the way I work. It's not necessarily the right way to do it, but probably not at all. But it's just a thing. It's just how I feel about the act of practice and the relevance of practice. It's just all of that I sort of question. I think that's another thing as well, that we shouldn't question what we do. It is what it is. It can't be, as I said earlier, it can't be rationalized in any way. It tends to be a little bit irrational, as all of it should be. But it's irrational only because we don't understand what's happening. It's not irrational in the sense that it's uncontrolled or crazy in some way. There is part of us that knows what's happening with this. It's just that we don't know enough about that part of our makeup. It's the creative consciousness thing. But I'm probably going to do a few lives today. I don't know if whether or not I can find enough references, but I think the intention is to do a few today and try and work through the elements that are popping up when we're discussing the new course. I think that's probably the intention of doing what we're going to do today, but don't quite know yet. It's all right. I'm just looking at the things as they start to get a better shape, but so I'm gonna leave it at that. I'll keep fiddling with it and putting things in the right place, moving them around. But I need to change the charcoal because you can see how flaky it is. I quite like sometimes when it does this grayness and not you consider a typical charcoal mark. I quite like the feeling of it being a little bit more like a wash type painting thing. But some things it's going to have to be more denser, denser at the top here, for instance, and just to get across the tonal aspects of it. You can see one of the things about that I always and you'll see it all the time I was looking at the drawings on Instagram. I'm thinking, what is it about my drawings that's peculiar, for want of a better word? And I think it's the contrast of some of these shapes and shadows and things. I think it's that's the number one thing. They tend to be very almost like stark, in the way that the shapes are defined. It's this. What I tell you, I hate the word, but notan is the kind of technical or Chiaroscuro. But as I said yesterday, I didn't even know what that word was until about till last year at least. I have no idea. And someone mentioned it, oh yeah. But it turns out I've been doing it for a long time, so no idea why. But yeah, as I said, if I think if I'd have known stuff like that, then I'd have been practicing, And since practicing is not my thing, as I've said, I didn't know it. I didn't need to know. That's the good thing about it as well, is that when you make work and or make a portrait or whatever, and it doesn't achieve for whatever reason, as I said, try not to be subjective. It has to be it has to be subjective and not objective, I should say. And you come to a conclusion about something that you've done, then you'll fix it accordingly. For whatever reason, you will fix that thing. And in the context, and it may well be that it's learning about indirectly, learning what chiaroscuro is, or what an OTAN is. It might be those things. You don't need to know that that's what you're doing. That's the thing, that you don't need to know that this is. I need to give it a title. It's a bit like the perspective thing. Do you really need to know it's called perspective? That things get smaller as they go further away. Do you really need to know it's called perspective? No. But you'd probably draw that if you were somebody that saw the world. You would see the trees got smaller as they went further away, or houses got smaller, or whatever, and you'd know that. You'd see that, but you didn't need to know what it was. No one needed to explain to you what perspective was, or even what it was called, because you're already doing it. Oh, so that's the same thing with the chiaroscuro thing. So I was already doing it, but I didn't know it existed, and that in itself says a lot about the process that we go through. That it should be more. Well, I suppose it's the responsive thing. And I was talking to someone this morning, and I thought, well, response for me is probably the fundamental action that an artist has or does. And what drives everything is their response to something. And if and it's true, really, I suppose. But if you think about how emotional artists are, we are emotional beings. We're very emotional in the sense that we're connected better with people, or should be. I feel as I am, and that, I think, is probably at the heart of what a true artist is about. It's always going to be about your response to the world, but or it should be, as opposed to your cataloguing, what I mean, of the world. Because that's the thing. The illustration thing. I always think that's what people are doing. They're just cataloguing things. This is what an eye looks like. This is what an ear looks like. It's I don't know. I think all of it. When I talk about the not needing to practice and everything, all of it's connected to a peculiar way of working. I think it's maybe not just my way, but there aren't many people that would talk about the doing in the way that I talk about it. I think it's too. Steve Houston mentioned about craft being a prime driver for making art, and I think he's right. That's what it is. So somebody who says craft isn't important is very going to be very scarce, and that's kind of what I say. And it does go against a lot of people's thinking. But said that, I say the whole thing's connected, and whether I practice or not, or whether I consider marks in a particular way, or the subjects I choose, even, it's all connected to this, how I need to respond to something. And that, I think, is the key for me. That's the key. If I can say one thing about what I do, it's all driven by response. It's all driven by my response to a person, to a reference, to a whatever. It's all driven by that, and which is probably why it's difficult sometimes when I'm not, when I'm overwhelmed by the doing. Because sometimes I do get overwhelmed by the doing, and it becomes about that, and all of a sudden I'm no longer connected to the thing. When I'm not connected, and I say this all the time, when I'm not connected, nothing happens. It just doesn't have the same feeling. I need to be connected to things. I need it to be an emotional event. If I can't have that, and it sounds a bit, I don't know. It sounds a bit, again, I often say this, I don't want to say this, but it sounds a bit too arty-farty, sort of, that it's an emotional journey and all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure journey is the right word, but it is an emotional event. It is an emotional occurrence, and I try to conjure that feeling. And we were saying the other day, and I was talking to this lady about the course, and we were trying to say, how do we get into that place? And short of talking about things like meditation and all that, which is not what I do, it doesn't seem a feasible thing. I think it's a case of maybe some kind of analysis, some kind of rationale that will help you to get to that place. But I don't know. I don't know whether or not it's a set of physical components, for it to be conducive, for you to suddenly, or not suddenly, but for you to feel a more connected bit, to feel more connected, and therefore respond more in a more powerful way. As I say, I don't really know. It's the thing is, I always, and I said this before, when people ask me about what I do, and I say I didn't want to tell them because I didn't want to overthink it. I didn't want it to become, I do it because this is why I do this, and because I'm not that kind of person. I am that kind of person, unfortunately, that would break it down and give it reason and almost create a recipe for replication. I am that kind of person. So I don't want to be that kind of person, because the things I get when I'm not that person are better than when I am. So if I try and rationalize something, it will inevitably destroy it, and that's the fear. So I'm trying to help people to feel the same thing as I do, but I'm trying not to make it a recipe. And that there is the dilemma, I suppose, that I'm experiencing. To try and do it in such a way that it doesn't become a recipe and a how-to guide kind of thing. Because as soon as it does, then it's my how-to and not your how-to. Because the fundamental of doing this is it's your journey, not mine. So if creating a recipe is, the way it goes, it becomes, Jamie Oliver's orange tart kind of thing, So it's a cooking recipe. So, and you can make this by all the ingredients you've got. We're using just the ingredients you've got in your cupboards, and it's that kind of thinking that I'm trying to get away from. I don't really want it to be a formula of how to do this. because inevitably it'll become about the doing and ultimately about practice. So as I said, for me, practice is something I would always steer clear of. But that's not to say that I'm right. If for whatever reason you think that some part of doing this needs to be done over and over and over again in order to get good at it, then by all means do that. But if that is the case, that something that has to be done over and over, draw regardless of the outcome, but be objective about the outcome. Try to remove yourself from the kind of the doctrine that it is all about this repetitiveness. This is all about doing this repetitively. That will make you better. Because I'm not sure it does. I think it makes you better in a different way, and stops the thinking part. Your creative part of it. Again, I don't want to talk about Robert Henri all the time. Read the book when he talks about artists that have practiced and practiced, and I think he uses a phrase something like, practice has often got in the way of creating great art, and it's those kind of things that when I read that, I think, my goodness, I'd already come to the conclusion that practice was a bad thing for me. And then when I read that in his book, I thought, oh, well, it's not just me then. And that's 100 years ago when he was saying things like that. And that's when he referred to them as brush jugglers. But like I say, just don't get bogged down by the idea that doing something over and over again is going to make you any better and a better artist. It'll make you a better production artist. But whether or not it'll make you a better artist is another thing. The only thing that makes you a better artist is making art. So as you can see, as Charlie said about on one of the comments of the week, I think Charlie, that this is sculpture more than drawing. As you can see, as I push things around and I'm moving it around, you can see that it is there's a lot more sculpture going on than there is what you might define as drawing, and which is I think this is the thing for me, the most important thing about charcoal is to do this, to accept it as a movable medium that's and the damage sort of as a consequence of the moving is part of the it's part of the the process. The way that there's the side effects of this moving things around is the best bit. It's the best bit. It's the bit that brings the color, the bit that the sort of internal marks, the remains of other marks, all those sort of things. Those are the things that are it's life and soul. Those are the things. Those are the things that you build the flesh on. So the journey, as we said earlier, that you go through when you're figuring this out and connecting better, and it evolves. All of those components are there to see as you and they well, not necessarily they're always there to see, but they are complicit in its effectiveness. They are part of the reason why it works is that these journey marks are still there. You can see as the thing evolves, you can see like the mouth evolves and all the rest of it. As those journey marks are manipulated, the whole thing has a different. You can see how that's getting more life in it, because the marks, as I'm pushing them around, it is literally, as Charlie said, it's literally a sculptural thing. But as I'm pushing them around, look how it sort of starts to have more structure, because the marks that didn't work, or the marks that were in the wrong place, or they were too dark, or whatever else it is, all those marks add the color to it. They're part of the tonal structure, so it becomes, it has more depth because of it. So yeah, but that, as I said, that's not me practicing to do that. That's me being aware of what's happening in a way, and being objective about what's happening as well. So it's a different thing. It's a different thing. It probably wouldn't suit most people because they're going to be embedded and wedded to the idea that practice makes perfect. That kind of thing. It's like, I mean, how indoctrinated are we that everybody knows that phrase? Is it a Victorian thing? Where does it come from? That practice makes perfect. Because unpack that. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, isn't it? Really. I mean, having the word perfection in any context is always going to be wrong, isn't it? He makes the perfect husband. He makes the perfect apple pie. The expectations right there. And what if he doesn't? What if ever at any one time he never made a perfect apple pie? What happens? Oh my God, it's not perfect. No, but it's nice. So yeah, it's the another one of those phrases that really is quite insidious, and it's probably done more harm than good, particularly with artists, because as I said, I always think that practice is the thing that stops you from doing the real work. But you'll practice and you'll judge your practice. You know what I mean? You'll judge it. Do you? You can't, can you? You can't judge your practice, but you will. I guarantee you will. And that should never happen. That should never happen. You should never, if you're going to practice, you should never judge it. You should never be, I'm practicing it. But you have to, otherwise you wouldn't keep doing it, because the first time you did it, it would be right, wouldn't it? So you wouldn't, or you'd be right in whatever criteria you're using. But if you're not happy with your practice, what does that mean? What does that? I don't get that at all. It seems to be contradictory somehow, doesn't it? That it's, I'll keep doing it, and because that last practice was rubbish. So, and then when it comes to doing the actual work, imagine applying the same criteria. So it's a mess. It's a mess, honestly. It's a mess. The reason why I keep away from practice, because it can mess with your head. Yeah. Anyway, I think I rambled enough for a Saturday morning. A sunny Saturday morning in Yorkshire, I might add. Again, we seem to be blessed at the moment with sunshine, and yeah, it's time to get the lawnmowers out. I think that's the thing now. In this weather, we've had a lot of rain, and now it's sunny. That's why everything's grown. So time to cut the lawn. So that might be a reason why I won't be doing any more lives today. I'll try, but I'll probably do them later. But hopefully the studio don't get too hot, because it's very warm in here. So I try not to do things late at night in the summer. Right, I've just about finished. I've just got to tweak a few things. I might sort the charcoal and just use a darker charcoal, just so I can get a little bit more density and things. Oh, it's all right. I mean, the thing about the charcoal that doesn't lay flat, which is what's happening, it doesn't sort of lay on the surface that well, is that it creates as you're going back and forth, you're creating a kind of a definitive mark. It's not bad with hair. If it does that with hair, it's okay, because it's probably not this kind of hair, but generally it will give you the feeling that these are you know, the strands of hair. So it's a kind of an easy way to sort of indicate hair. But this doesn't always do it, so I can't contradict. You know, I can't predict that it's going to. I use this piece and it will always do it. I just have to do it. I can recognize it, and then, you know, I'll carry on or I won't. You know, depending on what I'm drawing with it. But the whether I change it or not, I don't know. I might change it. I might change it to try something a little bit more. Then, so that these, you can't, probably can't, can you see? Yeah, you can see those like intermittent darker marks there. But as I said, it's not bad when you're drawing hair if it does that. So as I say, if I can even out the density, and I'm not too, so it's not too undulating. I think one of the things as well is that with this is it's got to be, you've got to follow the flow of the, you know, the hair. If it's going to do this kind of thing, and for it to work, you've got to follow the flow. Otherwise, it will look a bit clunky. I think one of the things that, and I said this before about the mark making thing. I mean, obviously it's a responsive thing for me, and I'm looking at it and all the rest of it. But one of the I suppose the trick that there was, and I said this before about the visualization thing, was that when we work with magic markers, the general direction of all the marks had to be quite even. You kind of accepted that because it's a spirit-based marker, that it would bleed and it would have certain kinds of edges. You know, when you put an alcohol-based pen on paper, particularly on things like, we used to use bond paper, which was really, really cheap for layouts, which is now referred to as layout paper, but I was writing reams, and it had this thing where when you put spirits on it, you'd end up with an edge. It kind of, the color would go to the edges of it, and the spirit would. So as you were putting the lines on, you had to get them really, really, and quick as well. Otherwise, they dry too quick with it being alcohol. So the same thing applies really when you're applying, when you're making tones or trying to indicate hair or whatever. If you can follow a particular uniform direction, it always works a lot better, even if it's just rough marks across, you know, rough lines across a face to create some kind of tone. If it's an evenness, if there's an evenness about it, it will always communicate the tone a lot better, or the effect a lot better. And that's I mean, I learned that by doing that. I didn't learn that by practice. I learned that by observation, because I worked in the studio with other artists. But I learned that primarily through from doing. I don't remember that when we were in the studio that we'd ever practice our visualization. You know, you would just, some would get gradually better, and you'd see that, and you'd think, well, why are they better? How are they putting down those flat colors and all the rest of it? And you'd figure it out, you know, and then you'd keep doing it, and then you'd get good at it, and then the newcomer, the lad in the studio who saw you doing it would pick up on that as well. So it was kind of learned by observation of others doing it. I suppose that's the way that it happened in the commercial world, because there was no time to practice in the commercial world. You just had to get on and do it, you know, and which suited me, obviously, you know, because